little time at the end for Q&A, so have your questions ready. First, I'd like to introduce Ian Flick, who's Senior Manager of Fresh Demand Planning at CNS Wholesale Grocers. Next, we have Emily Gibbons, who's VP of Data Science for Kroger's 8451 division, where she helps grow new ventures and revenue streams for the nation's largest traditional grocer. And then in the end, we have Tania Wallace, COO of DecorWorks, a family-owned branding, design, manufacturing, and installation business that focuses on independent grocers. So let's welcome our panelists. Thank you all very much for being here. So to get started, can each of you share some of your background about how you got started in the industry and what your current job entails?
Sure, I can start. So I'm Ian. I've worked at CNS for 5.5 years. I actually started at CNS as an intern. I'm from Keene, where CNS is headquarters. Keene is about a town of 20 to 25,000, and CNS is the major employee. So just kind of a natural fit of, you always look for your hometown. Going through college, you always want to get that first internship, and it just turned out that I got an internship in finance. Quickly realized that a weekly P&L in finance doesn't really cater to my what I like to do. I like to live a little bit in the chaos, which is perfect in the world of demand planning. So I did 2 years in the financial arm of CNS. Then I got accepted into a leadership development program that CNS has started to pioneer, where it's a rotation where I could really pick and choose what my own career path is. Going through college, I went to Rollins College, a small liberal arts school down in Orlando, Florida. Got away from the 13 inches that we got last night in Keene. Decided to go back for whatever reason. But within that rotation program, I got the opportunity to really kind of pick and choose what I wanted to do. I worked in procurement, went back down to Orlando, worked in our operations, worked with the transportation group, came back to Hatfield, got to work in the fresh procurement, that sales side. And after kind of culminating all of my experiences, we started actually our own demand planning group. So I just kind of thought that with my econ background about supply and demand, as well as all of my experiences, it was just that natural fit to take my college learnings plus my internship and my rotational experiences to really start working in demand planning and taking a department that was just data entry to really owning our own forecast, working with our customers, using our data to help guide our customers, making sure that they're bringing in the right products. So that's a little bit about me and what I do.
So hi everyone, my name is Emily Gibbons. I work at 8451, and I got my start. So my background is heavy quant. So I have a background in math, physics, and statistics. So very, very heavy quant background, and I was sort of headed down more of an engineering path. But when I left grad school, I was fortunate enough to get a position with a company called dunnhumby USA. And at that time, it was sort of the beginning of the big data science, sort of just becoming a big thing within the industry. And dunnhumby USA is a joint venture, or was a joint venture actually, within the US of a Kroger company and an international company called dunnhumby that did marketing analytics. And with my time at dunnhumby, I had an opportunity to work in a number of different retail sectors, so in nutrition and fashion retail, and very closely within grocery retail with the Kroger company specifically. And in 2015, the Kroger company actually purchased dunnhumby USA, and we became 8451. So I've spent my career basically working within the grocery retail sector specifically. What's exciting for me and why I've sort of stuck it out for as long as I've been with the company for 10 years now is where I was headed. More of an engineering is much more like a rigid path, where I think the opportunities in data science, especially within the retail sector, is a lot more about creative problem solving. So it's a lot more open-ended, and we have we have a very, very vast data asset when it comes to grocery retail, and there's a lot of power in that, and so I think that's what's exciting for me and why I've sort of stayed within the industry.
Awesome. I'm Tania Wallace. So I work at a family business, and I'm the second generation. So I started work quite young. I started working in our manufacturing department when I was about 14. So what we do is we design, we brand, we design, we engineer, we manufacture, and we install. So it's like we have three companies all in one. So for the last 15 years, I've had an opportunity to work in every department. So I started out in manufacturing, knowing our materials, knowing how it's built. Then I went to college and graduated in graphic design and marketing, and this is where I really learned how it is that we build things out and what the psychology is of the interior decor part. And then for the last several years, I've been within the sales department, and then I'm the COO. So I'm the one that's bringing everything together to making sure that our projects are going through the system smoothly. And so I encompass a lot of different entities within our company, but it's very exciting.
I think the talent we have on stage here today really demonstrates the diverse nature of the food and grocery and CPG industry, because there are so many different knowledge bases here for so many different parts of the industry that a lot of people may not, outside of our industry, understand that's there. And I think perhaps that's what makes the industry kind of a mystery and not attractive to people, particularly younger generation, entering it as a career. These three and the folks in the room last night and today being the exceptions, obviously. I'd like to ask our panelists, what are some of the misconceptions you think that people have about the grocery business?
About the grocery business, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that they don't really understand what goes into it, really how the sausage is made, not just in the meat side of things, but how does it go from manufacturer to grocery retailer. And you can really see that when you experience an out of stock at the retail level. Every time you go into the grocery store, you expect you're going to get everything on your shopping list, and you have that bad consumer experience when you don't have that. So I think just understanding what goes into it, and really the fact that it's a $1 trillion industry, combining the CPG side plus the grocery side. When I learned about that, that just completely blew my mind, how big of an industry it is. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people think of, is to say you go to your normal grocery store, but you don't really understand how big of a sector it is and how many jobs go into it, as well as what I really took away from my operations experience is what goes into the operations side, how hard selectors in the warehouses work, putting in 13-hour days, especially during a snowstorm up in New England right now. You just think of, okay, I'm gonna get my French toast diet, I'm gonna get my bread, my eggs, and my milk. You don't realize that that surge in demand puts a lot of pressure across the supply chain. So it's really kind of, I think, the normal consumer just goes to the grocery store without realizing how big and vast an industry our industry truly is.
I think what I would say, one of the misconceptions is that the grocery retail industry is just slow moving and kind of stale. I think a lot of people just sort of see it as this traditional, kind of never changing type of space, when I think all of us know that it is actually incredibly fast paced. And I think it's an industry more than any other sort of retail sector that's ingrained in communities, it's ingrained in people's lives and their everyday tasks. And I think the power of that is really incredible. And I think that specifically, talking about it from the data science side, I mentioned this in my intro, but like the data asset within grocery retail is so deep and longitudinal, and it's not something that a lot of other sectors have, and there's so much power in that. And my area that I work on today within 851 is in alternative revenue, and a lot of that work is that was mentioned, so it's in investments. So the power of that data asset within an investment framework for early stage brands is huge. The power of that data set within a healthcare setting where you think about food as medicine is huge, and I think that's something that a lot of consumers really don't think about.
One of the things when I tell people, we design for grocery, they're like, oh, what do you mean grocery? And it's like, yeah, that's not such a sexy term that people are like really endeared to grocery. And it's like, no, but you don't understand. There is so much passion behind food. I mean, the creativity that you have, you have these organizations across the country who are just waiting for consumers to come in and create and bring in ingredients, and that's where the family is focused around, are these meals that they're making. And so a misconception is that it's this outdated, stale industry, when really those grocers that are really capitalizing on that passion and creativity and innovation that you can have with food, and that love for it, those are the ones that are really thriving. And I think people miss that because they just see a blanketed, outdated industry instead of the innovation that is happening.
I think based on what you said just now, there's really a potential for grocery to follow most of what the rest of retail has become. It's not so much anymore about selling products, but selling a lifestyle. Grocery can really be a lifestyle brand based on that excitement that can be created, the solutions that people are looking for. It's not just, selling food, it's selling a way to live your life, because people come in needing to put dinner on the table, and there's really few things more important than being able to do that. We talked about the misconceptions people have about the grocery business. Now, you are among the exceptions of young people who have found real fulfillment and achievement in this industry. What misconceptions do you think people have about members of your generation, potential leadership that exists among millennials and Generation Zs?
I'm glad I'm going first because I think this is the easiest one. We are the snowflake generation. You always hear about it. It's the millennials. They don't want to work hard. They're entitled. They're overprivileged. Yada, yada, yada. The list goes on and on. And I think this group included, we really challenge that. I think what I try and get my team to do is really focus in on the work smarter and not harder. If I can work 45 hours and do a task that might take me 30 hours, why not do the work in 30 hours? Why am I gonna just kind of hang around at work and really focus in on that work-life integration? And I think that's kind of the biggest misconception is that the millennials, the Gen X, just want everything kind of handed to us, where we want to actively flip that misconception around, basically prove it, kind of stick it to everyone that says, everyone that's ever doubted you or in the workplace to say, like, just because you're young, because you're inexperienced, doesn't mean you have the best and the brightest ideas. And I think that's why we were all chosen, is that we flip that misconception around.
I would say two things specifically. One is I think within a retail setting, customer bases are diverse, and so I think it's important that our teams reflect that same diversity, and so whether that be with age, race, gender, everything. But I think the other thing very specific to my field within data science is when we have, like, our talent strategies are very heavily focused on young talent, and a lot of that is because within the technical fields, young talent comes with a completely new perspective. They're trained on new tools, they're trained on new technologies, new methodologies, and I think their ability, kind of echoing some of your point, their ability to come in and challenge the ideas that we have is really critical to the disruptive role that 8451 plays for Kroger. And so we kind of need those new ideas to continue to push on what we have as generalized concepts within the day-to-day. We kind of expect the challenge to come and we encourage it. And I think it's part of the culture to try to make sure that everyone has a voice and that we're not looking at who's giving the idea, but really what the idea is and the benefits that it could bring to the table.
Mine is, I feel like a misconception is that our generation can't take the heat, we can't take the stress, and we can't take the responsibility. So our company did a restructuring about 2.5 years ago when I was put into my position, and we're a family-owned company, and so we go around and everyone had a vote who went into the COO role, and my dad pulled me aside and he said to me, hey, do you really want to do this? Because this is hard. He's like, you've been somewhat protected, in the creative director role or within these various roles, and he's like, do you really get it? And at the time I thought I got it, and I thought, okay, yeah, I can go in and I can figure it out. But then over the last 2 years, it's been incredibly difficult, more than what I ever could imagine. But we can take the heat, we can take the pressure. And so my leadership team, everyone spans, I think, I am the youngest, so I'm 29, and we span up to 37 with my directors. And we're making the decisions for the company and moving us forward and having the innovation and having the heartache when we have problems go on. And I think most people think that our generation will flee and won't put in the hours or the effort, but we can take it.
Well, I think what's really important about what you're saying is that by having the younger generation doing, in your case, the design of the stores, you need that to appeal to the younger generation that's coming in as consumers, because they're the ones who are coming and spending more of the money and need to be the ones who have to be given the reason to come into the store rather than sitting at home and clicking an order and having it delivered or coming and pick it up. And what's gratifying is that the younger generations are showing a propensity for wanting to come in for that store experience So it needs to be compelling and exciting and on their level. Which leads me to my next question. How do you think the industry is doing to appeal to younger people, both as a career and to consumers? Where do you think it falls short, and what does it still need to do to improve?
I think from a personal side, if I didn't grow up in Keene, New Hampshire, I would never even think about choosing our industry as a career path. Like we said, it's not sexy. You don't just everyone kind of clamors to say, oh, I want to go make big bucks in Wall Street or do whatever. But you realize that our industry is truly $1 trillion, and there's so much opportunity for innovation and improvement in something that every single person needs. We always need nutrients. That's kind of like the theme of death and taxes, or you can always expect death and taxes. People need to eat. So why can't we take what we think of as a stale industry and change it? Kind of talking about the disruptive generation. I think our generation is really good at looking at a problem and saying, I have a better way to solve this. Just because it's been like this for 100 years or 1,000 years doesn't mean that we can't come in and flip it. Because I think we're a lot more, we're less change adverse, we're more willing to take advanced risks. I think that's something that I think we all, our companies need to do, and our industry needs to do a better job, is promoting how big of an industry it is, as well as we're kind of in an inflection point. Talking about going to frictionless markets with Amazon Go, and Ahold Delhaize is working on automated checkout, as well as the opportunities there are with food deserts. There's so much potential for our industry to continue to grow. I think we just do a poor job as really marketing to that, getting college kids to actually buy into the fact that you can have a lifelong career working in the CPG and grocery industry.
So I guess I have two things on this. I think one is that is a really major appeal that I think we could do better at, is that, and I kind of hit this on the misconception, is that science and tech are a huge part of the grocery retail industry and the CPG industry, and I think it's missed. And I think that is a very appealing career choice for a lot of young talent, and I think putting that more at the forefront so that people are aware of what the opportunities are when it comes to innovation and technology and science, and how science-driven the industry really is. I mean, we heard it this morning, we were talking about the pipeline of innovation and the way they're using data to drive that process. So I think getting things like that more at the forefront is really an opportunity. I think another piece that I find personally really important, and I think a lot of other folks would as well, is the role that major retailers and major brands play in society and community as a whole, and kind of the social awareness they bring. So I think specifically with Kroger, they have an initiative called Zero Hunger, Zero Waste. And I think initiatives like that are very powerful and inspiring people, and really the presence of a large organization can have on the communities, and the power behind that. And I think that that's another thing that not only can appeal to young talent, but that is important to continue to put at the forefront.
I think the workforce right now is tough. So we're located in rural Utah. I mean, Utah is rural in itself, and then I'm in a town that's we have about 38,000 people. 12,000 of them are students. And so there's not a lot of employment opportunities. And what we have found is that we have to be very strategic, years in advance. And I feel like the industry misses this. So a way that we have strategically crafted our cultures, we say, okay, in 3 years, what do we want our team members to be saying around the water cooler? What it does is it helps us say, okay, what is it that we're wanting to have happen? What are those things that they're talking about? In 3 years, what do we want our team members' families to be saying about us? In 3 years, what do we want the media to be saying about our company? So instead of us saying, okay, this is where we're wanting to be from the top down, we're saying, okay, what does it look like from the bottom up, and how can we put ourselves in those shoes? And then from there, we were able to start to craft the initiatives and the outreach and the conversation that we wanted to have happen in several years. The other thing is, I have this phrase, purpose fuels passion. And passion gives to innovation, and innovation leads to longevity. And this is where if your team members, if they have a purpose that's deeper than just showing to work and being in grocery, if they know what they're doing, like the zero waste, that's where they start to think and brainstorm and become connected to that purpose. And then that's where you'll get your longevity from.
Yeah, to tie back in, at least in my department, working on the forecasting, especially in that fresh space, everything is self-correcting. If I over-forecast it, it's going to go bad. So what we can do, working, really using data science, using that data that we naturally have as a wholesaler to go back to our customers to say, a great example is frozen shrimp. It's going to be frozen shrimp season for the next 3 weeks with Christmas and New Year's. It's looking at the sustainability of our oceans to say, I can actually make a difference in the world by better predicting what my customers are going to sell during the season. It helps prevent that overfishing that we all hear about, making our oceans more sustainable. That little fact that in my day job, I can make a greater impact on the entire society for not just our generation, but for future generations is huge. And you think about how much food waste we go into it. We always hear about the amount of food waste that happens across the globe. We produce, I think in the US, enough to feed almost the entire world, but most of it goes bad within inefficiencies of the supply chain. So what I think we need to do a better job of is really promoting the fact that we can take action in the grocery industry to create better cause. We can find that passion project, like you said, because that passion does fuel ourselves. And I think that's something, a misconception, to go back to an earlier question. I think our generation is really more geared towards finding that passion project than just finding another 9 to 5.
Emily made an interesting point earlier. She said that one of the misconceptions is that the grocery industry is stale when it's really anything but. I think probably 10 years ago you could have still said it was stale. Now you can't, just by the very nature of what the business has become. It can't be stale. We've all heard it said that things are changing now faster than they ever have been, but they won't never change as slow again. I think that's very true. Taking that into consideration, I'd be interested in hearing from each of you what your vision is for the industry's future and what it needs to do to stay relevant.
I actually just read a really interesting article in the Washington Post where it talked about Baldwin, Florida, where Baldwin, Florida is a food desert. And what caught my eye is we have 4 warehouses in Baldwin, Florida specifically that has millions of dollars worth of food product right now. We probably just threw out a couple $1,000s worth of product. But we have all of this product in warehouses, but it can't get out to the end consumer. So it's what can we do to make sure that us as Americans can provide that kind of breadbasket to other Americans. And I think looking at the frictionless checkout stores, the smaller convenience in these food desert areas is a huge opportunity for us. And I think that's where we really need to shift that focus to. Not only just that social aspect, but there's huge opportunities. So I think it's a perfect partnership to make sure that every American has that ability to get quality food products that they need. And I think that's really an interesting space that we can really look forward to growing in over the next couple of years.
I think some things for the future. I think one is going to be that, and we're kind of headed in this direction now, is that as much as retailers and brands try to curate experiences for consumers, I think it's more and more about consumers curating their own experience for themselves. And so whether it be things like frictionless checkout or delivery, or I can mix my own flavors that we were hearing about this morning, I think that is really where everything is going. And as consumers are more in the driver's seat of trying to curate the experiences that they want, and that flexibility is inherently going to drive the sustainability of the companies that last. I think another thing on that is huge right now, especially within the data industry, and I think and think about CRM and all of those, is privacy is huge, and privacy is a big part of the work that we do. So think about things like CCPA, which is the California Privacy Protection, and GDPR, which is the European Privacy Protection. So more and more consumers are owning their data, and I think it's really critical for retailers and brands to be thinking about not only how to be trustworthy and good stewards of that data, but also making sure the value proposition works for consumers, that they're willing to give that up. And so I think that's going to be really, really huge, even in the next couple of years, to make sure that consumers understand where that value comes from and that they're willing to share that information, because it's hugely valuable to driving the future of the industry as a whole.
We attended a food show a couple months ago, which I think it was in May, and there was a speaker there, and he talked about that you have to be one of three things, or you have to offer one of three things. You either have to offer an extreme experience, you have to be extremely economical, or you have to be extremely convenient. So there is no option of trying to be all things or trying to be vanilla anymore. I mean, you've got to choose an area and then really dive in. And the extreme experience, that is where we have an opportunity within the food industry. I mean, we have all of the senses that we can capture. We can capture the smell and create an environment. We can do taste, we can do touch. Everything that creates an experience is within the grocery industry. And so for the grocers who are going to stay around and not be cannibalized and not go out of business, it's those guys that are going to offer one of those three things and do it amazing, because there is no option of not innovating and not diving in and committing to a customer experience.
Any questions from the audience?
I'll throw one out. So first of all, I want to say, Emily, I really agree with your point around the industry not leading with the technology and engineering opportunities. I think very often from a recruiting standpoint, particularly towards the next generation, it's more focused on recruiting people to grocery, and they don't really spotlight the opportunities for looking at unique data sets or actually innovating with the latest technology. So I think you made some good points there. I'd like to ask the three of you, I think there is a labor challenge though that exists in our industry in terms of recruiting people into roles. I mean, there has been a grocery store that I visited in the last 18 months that's not recruiting a meat cutter, somebody behind the deli counter. They're typically bringing people back from retirement to fill these roles. And I think there are spaces in our industry that are easily or more easily automated, perhaps around trucking, warehouse, and distribution, but some of those in-store roles are hard to recruit out of our generation. How do you think about labor shortages at the retail level, and how do you bring in the next generation of talent to kind of fulfill that guest experience standpoint at store level?
I mean, I can start. I think that's a huge thing, because I think the in-store experience, and so kind of getting back to what I said about the future of consumers being able to drive their own experience, that starts with having people around where if they want to engage, they can engage. If they don't have to. Like, there's a lot of different ways that comes to light. And so I think it's a huge thing. I think it starts with showing the career pathing that can come from people that start in stores. I mean, if you look, especially at the Kroger company, there's so many of the general office and senior executives that have grown up in the stores. And I think that's really a powerful story to tell to a young person, to say, yeah, you may be working behind the deli counter today, but that can lead to store management, that can lead to category management, and I think that it's kind of a miss to not capture that story and to make sure that people are aware of it, because I think that would be hugely beneficial in helping people see that this isn't just a summer job, that this could be a career, but I think that's the opportunity.
So as a wholesaler, I can't really speak to the retail level, but where I see CNS specifically is creating that career path to say this might be an entry-level job, but you can take your learnings and apply it to somewhere else. So something that CNS is trying to do a better job of is right now, or in the past, we've been very, very siloed in our departments. Even though we might be all within a procurement organization of demand planning, the actual procurement or the buying groups and the merchandising groups, we didn't do a good job of talking to each other, even though our jobs depended on each other. And I think what our generation is starting to do is force that status quo to change, to say, just because I work in demand planning doesn't mean I need to go from a demand planning analyst to a senior to a team lead of demand planning and work my way up. I can take my experiences at one level and pass them along to another level. So I can work in demand planning, then I can go work as a buyer, or I can go work on the sales side because I understand that supply chain. So I think what we can do a better job is just being able to be a little bit more flexible with our employees to get that kind of diversity in their background to figure out what they want to do.
We are not a retailer, but we work with a lot of retailers. And one of the clients that we work with is called Harmon's. And what they've done is if you work at Harmon's, it's a prestigious position. If you're in the bakery, it means that they're flying you out to San Francisco, to do their artisan bread training. If you work as a cheesemonger, it means you're going to Europe and you're learning about the cheeses. And they don't just hire anybody to be in these customer-facing roles. They hire people that love food. So what they've done is they've taken some of the roles that other people might look at as a summer job, and there's some prestige around who they are and what they do, and there's a celebration about their education and their love for the food. And so the conversation is different. The conversation is more of their passion and what they're bringing to the table than what I think traditional retailers would have. And so they're ones that if you have questions, they're very open, and you can look at their things, but they've done a great job in onboarding, hiring, and creating that continual longevity while they work there.
Other questions? All right, well, let's wrap up with one final question that I'll put to each of you. What's the one most important thing in your mind that consumers need to understand about the grocery industry?
I think for this, it goes back to one of my original comments of how everything that goes into it, how passionate we all are in making sure that the end user experience is as high as possible. And it's looking at not just making sure that we have the right fill rates at our store level, making sure that we don't just overstock product because that product might get a little bit dusty at the store level, or in the case of the fresh space, it's self-correcting. And I think one of the worst experiences that you can have is going to a grocery store, buying chicken, and you coming home and that chicken is bad. But it's also making sure that you have that customer experience level and all the thought that goes into saying, okay, I'm gonna have a test kitchen at my store to really showcase my product. So I think it's kind of that misconception of all of the work that we do to make sure that that end consumer experience is at a highest possible level.
I think I would say for what consumers should know is that they're in the driver's seat, because I think a lot of them don't really think they are, but they are very much in the driver's seat of what's coming next. What are the next brands? What are the retailers that have staying power? They vote with their wallet, they vote with their loyalty, they vote with their data. And I think that that's very powerful for a consumer to know, and that they might not realize how much they're defining what the future should be by the behaviors that they have today.
My opinion is that people need to realize and understand how vital our stores are within communities. I mean, think of any other location that you can go to. You can see friends, you can see neighbors, you can see family. There's something about our supermarkets that connects communities, no matter your demographic. And if we don't rally around and really get people bringing their votes into the local stores, into the communities, and having that relationships. And if the store isn't representing that community, there's something lost there. And so over time, if consumers lose that passion for going to the stores and meeting their store and ordering from their store, we're gonna lose something that humanity needs, and it's that connection and those relationships. And our industry is one of the biggest hubs for those connections.
Thank you so much to all of you for sharing your insights with us today. Let's have a round of applause for Ian, Emily, and Samantha. Thank you so much.